Prosecution is rested in the George Zimmerman case, and tomorrow morning the defense will begin to make its case. What surprises can we expect? Joining us now is host of Judge Alex Ferrer, and he has, of course, been following this case closely. Judge, great to have you here.
It's always great to be here, Elsie.
Let's start with the prosecution. Were they able to accomplish that George Zimmerman engaged in a dangerous act and something out of ill will, which would, of course, allow them to convict him of second-degree murder?
I don't think they did. I mean, the requirements for second-degree murder require that ill will, hatred, spite. The prosecution was hanging its hat on those utterances that he made in the car about burglars in the neighborhood. It just doesn't seem enough. They also were kind of trying to imply racism, and the evidence has shown anything but.
Why? How is it proven that he was not a racist?
Well, for example, the police officer, the lead investigator in front of the jury said, you know, in my investigation, when I realized that he had been mentoring young African-American children, and we've also learned that he went and tried to fundraise for a black homeless man who had been beaten up by a cop's son and things like that. Everything that the officer learned, he said in front of the jury, it made me realize there was no racial bias here, no racial profiling here. So that really hurt the implication the state was trying to make.
Okay, so you think that the prosecution will not be able to convict him on second degree. Is it possible manslaughter?
Manslaughter definitely is possible. It's still hard because he has a pretty good self-defense claim. See, the problem with this case is there's only one side of the story. And this happens all the time. This is not unique. Judges, lawyers see this all the time where one side is dead and the other side has their version. So manslaughter is still a possibility because if the jury decides that self-defense was not appropriate, that he went too far with the situation he was in, then manslaughter is the natural charge after that.
I see. Okay, so what does the defense have to do this week?
Well, for one thing, they're going to rebut that. The medical examiner the prosecution put on was a train wreck.
Explain for people who didn't see it. What did he do wrong, the medical examiner?
He was just all over the place. He wouldn't answer a question. It looked like almost he had a manifesto he wanted to read to the jury. I mean, he just had his agenda that he wanted to put out there. When you see the forensic pathologist that I think the defense is going to put on, Vince DeMaio, you'll see a difference. I mean, he's a very professional, and he wrote the book that their ME relied on. So I think they're going to come in and they're going to rebut a lot of things. For example, I expect to hear, I don't know, but I expect to hear that the reason there is no bruising on Trayvon Martin's hands, consistent with the amount of injuries, is because when you die, when you get shot, your heart stops pumping blood, and it is the pumping of blood that causes the bruising over time. You hit yourself, you don't see a bruise till later because the heart is pumping blood to that location, and later on the bruise surfaces. So I think that's going to be used by the defense to explain why they don't have a lot of injuries on his hands. Things like that are going to come out during the defense side of the case, but they don't have to do a lot. They're certainly not going to put George on.
They're not going to put George Zimmerman.
Not a chance. There's
because
no chance.
It can only have a downside.
Well, his story has already been put out there 5 different times. He's given his interviews, and that's another thing that helped his case. The police got on there and said, look, the guy never asked for a lawyer. He never lawyered up. He answered all of our questions. Yeah, there were inconsistencies, but we as police officers didn't think they were significant. So now subjecting him to cross does nothing except run risk.
Final question. Is there a conviction of something at the end of this trial?
Well, legally, there could very easily be a total acquittal. You know, not because what George did is not wrong. I mean, there may be people on the jury who go, we totally disagree with him getting out of the car and going after the Trayvon and all this stuff, but the evidence simply may not be there. But they may come back with a manslaughter conviction if they don't buy his self-defense claim. And that's as bad for George as anything else because the most he faces, the maximum is 30 years because of the use of a gun.
All right, this will be a very interesting week in court. Judge Alex, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Elsie.